We interrupt this commercial break to bring you following breaking news right now. Police say they have identified the body of a woman found dead in Old Bridge, New Jersey. Investigators say the body belonged to 25-year-old Stephanie Parze, who went missing in October. And right now, officials in New Jersey are holding this press conference to discuss these new developments. Let's take a listen in.
And the following day, on October 31st, Stephanie did not show up for work at her babysitting job. Throughout the day, her family and loved ones made repeated attempts to contact her that were unsuccessful. And that point, around 8 o'clock on October 31st, reported her missing. With the assistance of the Freehold Township Police Department, our agency immediately launched essentially what worked out to be 2 criminal investigations. One, a missing persons investigation, and the other, while not announced publicly at the time, a homicide investigation. We identified 29-year-old John Osbilgan as a person of interest early on in our investigation, based largely on his on and off nature of his relationship with Stephanie and a number of social media communications that we were made aware of. Our office and several law enforcement partner agencies conducted an exhaustive homicide investigation over these past 3 months. We executed more than 50 search warrants in 10 different locations across the region during our investigation. We searched Osbilgan's residence 5 times, and we also canvassed hundreds of acres of land in Monmouth, Middlesex, and Ocean counties, as well as in Staten Island, all in search of Stephanie Parze, based on evidence that we had gathered during our investigation. Today we announced that now deceased John Osbilgan was responsible for the homicide of Stephanie Parze. This is a finding we had suspected since early November, but was only recently confirmed with further analysis of evidence that we had seized during our investigation. The finding was confirmed as well soon after Osbilgan committed suicide on November 22nd, 2019. Among other items recovered from his home after his suicide was a note that John Osbilgan left for his parents. In the note, Osbilgan stated that he had had enough and that he could not do life in prison. He also admitted that while what his parents would hear in the news was true, except for charges of child pornography that were filed by our office on November 9th, 2019. Osbilgan acknowledged that he had dug himself a deep hole and wrote at the end of his note that this was the only choice. Sadly, however, in that note, he never disclosed where he disposed of Stephanie's remains. Now, while the Parze family, standing to my left, Mr. and Mrs. Parze, was aware of our investigative conclusions throughout the entire process, we held off on notifying the public because we were still working on finding Stephanie and because we were maintaining an active homicide investigation. I'm sure the question that comes to many of your minds is, how was Stephanie killed? That remains to be confirmed by the Middlesex County Medical Examiner's Office. Cause and manner of death are sometimes difficult to determine without having remains, but thankfully that changed yesterday with the discovery and, of course, this morning's news. I think the most important development to focus on is that Stephanie was found. Of course, all of us hoped and prayed that we would find her alive, even against the odds and the evidence in this case. But today, we sincerely hope and pray that the Parze family can have some level of closure and lay their daughter to rest in peace. I'm joined today by Stephanie's parents, who I mentioned earlier. It's Ed and Sharlene Parze. They have been the picture of grace throughout the most difficult time that any person, much less parent, can imagine under these terrible circumstances. And I'd like to invite Mr. Parze up to say a few words.
Good morning. Of course, this is an extremely somber day for us. It goes without saying that our family is devastated, our friends, our community, and our lives are never going to be the same. However, Stephanie is home. She's coming home. at last, right where she belongs. And we have God to thank for that. This was an effort by thousands of dedicated people. I've said it many times in many news conferences and with a lot of the reporters that come to the house and come to the searches. I've never seen such a devoted group of committed people in my life. I mean, the communities have bonded together from here all the way out to Staten Island and all around the country. It's been something to see. People have made new friends. People have become part of the family. We never knew these people before this happened. It's just such a mass of people that you cannot imagine. I could never even count them. The community came together so much, the donations, the food, running events, and so forth. It just was out of control. But we thank you all for that, because without that, we could have never got through this. I want to thank the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office and Police Department for getting her home to us. The two boys that found her. The Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office and Freehold Township Police Department. They've went way beyond the call of duty. We're indebted to them. We thank them so much. Of course, we have to thank all of Steph's angels. A phrase we came up with, because there were so many of them. Only heaven could have brought them down. So dedicated. It was amazing. We're not going to stop our efforts, even though we know she's home. Eventually, in the upcoming weeks, we're going to start a Stephanie Parze Foundation, bring awareness to battered women and missing people. It's an epidemic. It's totally an epidemic. If you do any research, it's 800,000 people a year in this country, 16,000 people alone in New Jersey. In New Jersey. It's just out of control. You know, one of the statistics I read that we were driven by was, it said 3 out of 4 people that go missing are found within the first 90 days. 87 days. We found her. We can never thank you enough. Our inner circle, people that are closest to us, Paul and Steve and everybody else who knows who they are. We love you guys. We thank you so much.
We have been watching an update from police in Middlesex County in New Jersey. Investigators say they have now decided.
As pointed out by Mr. Parze, the scale of these investigations are never accomplished alone. And on behalf of our entire office and the entire law enforcement community in Monmouth County, I want to thank the following agencies for their outstanding support in this case. Freehold Township Police Department, represented today by Chief Ernie Schriefer, who stands with us today. Thank you, Chief. The New Jersey State Police, the New York Police Department, Monmouth County Rapid Deployment Force, the Bergen County Sheriff's Office, the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office, the Jackson Police Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, of course the Old Bridge Police Department, and of course the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office, represented today with me by Acting Prosecutor Chris Kuberate to my right and Chief Paul Miller. Chris, I want to give you a special thanks to you and your team for keeping us apprised minute by minute as this discovery occurred yesterday afternoon. I'm grateful for your partnership and that you were able to bring this to a head and allow this family to at least have some level of peace. Thank you, sir. Congratulations.
Good afternoon. As Prosecutor Gramiccioni indicated, my name is Christopher Kubright. I'm the acting prosecutor of Middlesex County. And yesterday at 2:46 p.m., authorities received a phone call generated from 2 teenagers, a 17 and an 18-year-old teenager walking south on Route 9 in the township of Old Bridge, just south of Old Mill Road. As a result of that phone call, the Old Bridge Police Department, led by Chief Volkert, as well as the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office, was able to work collaboratively with Prosecutor Gramiccioni and his team to bring a small degree of closure to the Parze family. I'd offer my deepest condolences to the Parze family as they contend and grapple with this inexplicable loss. And I also would like to applaud the efforts of Monmouth County Prosecutor Gramiccioni, his team, his staff, the Freehold Township Police Department, and law enforcement in general for their dogged pursuit of justice in this matter. And I thank you.
Now, today we've assigned criminal responsibility to John Osbilgan for Stephanie's death, but our investigation does still continue to wrap up some loose ends that sprung from this matter. I won't have any further comment about that, but it's important that what I say should not be read to believe that we believe there are other conspirators that might be responsible for Stephanie's death. That guilt belongs to John Osbilgan and John Osbilgan alone. I'll close with 2 points. First, I would like to thank particularly the members of the communities across Monmouth County, especially in Freehold, the citizens and friends and loved ones and family members of the Parze family who so tirelessly, on so many occasions, worked to try to find where Stephanie was over these past 3 months. They were kind enough to coordinate their efforts with the prosecutor's office. They, like us, had searched hundreds of acres of areas trying to find Stephanie. And as Mr. Parze says, we bring her home today. She will be getting brought home very soon. The other thing I'd like to say is I would ask members of the media to please have some courtesy and respect for the Parze family under these terrible circumstances. Give them an opportunity to breathe, to lay their lovely daughter to rest. And with that, I'll do my best to answer any questions that you might have. Brian, good morning, or good afternoon.
Chris, sorry about that. As far as the issue that Ed brought up about the foundation, battered women, who have boyfriends, spouses, whatever the case may be, how serious of a problem do you consider this to be in New Jersey, not just Monmouth County?
Well, I don't think it's prudent for me to speak about New Jersey. My jurisdiction lies in Monmouth County. Let's use this investigation as an example. The target, who is dead, Osbilgan, we know that he was charged with 3 domestic violence incidents, one of which obviously involves Stephanie. We know from our investigation that there was a history of domestic violence. So when you consider that and then you think about the number of relationships and citizens across the county in Monmouth, do we have an epidemic or a problem? I wouldn't go that far, but this happens, and there's no room for that. We in the Monmouth County law enforcement don't tolerate this, and it's important for anybody who's being victimized in this fashion to know that you have a friend and an ally in this office, in your local police departments. And if you're not comfortable with that, there are a number of advocacy agencies that we work with, like 180 Turning Lives Around, which we have a co-located presence at the courthouse that we support in Monmouth County. There are ways for you to be heard. There are places for you to go. There are steps that we can take to protect your confidentiality and to ensure that there's no retribution. The only way we can police conduct like this is for you to confide in someone in Monmouth to help you get out of that terrible situation you're in. I don't think I can go any further and kind to assess that. Obviously, the nature of domestic relationships, a lot happens behind closed doors. A lot is driven by relationships, but suffice it to say we're on it. We pay attention to it.
Can
Yeah.
I follow up on that?
Sure.
There were 3 domestic violence complaints filed against him. Is there anything more that law enforcement can do in a situation like that? What holds you back from keeping this guy locked up or away from people or whatever?
Well, the target's actually obviously dead, Brian, so that's a tough question under a specific circumstance. What holds us back is kind of what I'm saying now. I need people who are victimized, we just want them to let us know. Take steps to help yourselves, whether it's through law enforcement or these different advocacy groups, to get you out of that cycle of abuse. And in terms of confinement or detention, when it comes to charges, every case is different. I mean, everything is assessed on a case-by-case basis. But the judiciary, the courts across this state and Monmouth County, they're aware of this issue. and we pay close attention to it. And I think everybody in public service agrees there's no place for this type of conduct. Maybe this case, maybe the visibility, thanks to you all in the media and the public that it brings, maybe that'll, if it's one or more, or a handful of victims that say no more and come forward, that's a legacy that I think Stephanie and your family should and would be proud of. Yes, sir. Keith, how are you?
Ed mentioned that he had never seen this type of support for search efforts like this for missing persons before. In your experience, have you ever seen a community come together like this and value to find somebody as much as they did for Stephanie?
Yes, I've seen it, unfortunately, in the other missing person case we have, the Jacqueline Taruli case, which we still continue to actively investigate. I've seen similar action, call to action from members in the community and friends and family of that family. So, I mean, I just don't believe that that's an unusual scenario. I'm proud to be the prosecutor here and the chief law enforcement officer in Monmouth. And one of the things that I think is a true testament to the duty and the oath we all take is to never giving up. And that's a mantra here. You see with the solving of a 25-year-old cold case just a week ago, or some of the other cold cases we have. I can't guarantee results, but I can guarantee that people on my team and people in the Monmouth County law enforcement community are going to continue to fight and not give up. Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us any more details about what the circumstances that brought this person in the area with Stephanie found yesterday? And was this an area that was searched before, or maybe
That was an area that was searched before, but to that question, I'm going to turn it over to Prosecutor Kubright. Since it's in his jurisdiction, he's probably better versed to answer that.
As has been indicated, it is an ongoing investigation. There are detectives and forensic teams still on location. So as far as the detail, we're going to be keeping that limited at this particular time. But the 17 and 18-year-old teenager were walking southbound Route 9 and observed Stephanie's remains from the side of the road.
How far, can you say how far in they were, under bushes, next to?
At this point in time, we'd rather not disclose that information since it is ongoing.
Can you describe what that area is like? Is it swampy? Is it wooded? What's it like?
At this point in time, it's the side of the road on Route 9. As far as swamps or wooded, it is a wooded area, but much more than that, I'm not inclined to provide.
Where she was found, would you describe it as a wooded area?
Yes.
Chris, at what point in time did you conclude that Jonathan was responsible for the homicide? And if he hadn't seen his own life, when do you imagine charges might have been filed in this case?
Well, it's very difficult to speculate. It's a fair question, but I think it's fair to say that we centered in on him as certainly the target in this investigation early to mid-November. That was reaffirmed, and then we were communicating with the Parze family throughout. That was reaffirmed with the evidence that I described earlier. When he committed suicide, we had searched his residence then and found a note that just reaffirmed his responsibility for her death. But it's obviously very difficult to investigate and prosecute a homicide investigation without recovering remains. We've had success in the past, but every case is different. So that makes it extremely difficult. I couldn't tell you when or if, and speculate we might have charged him, but we were working actively towards that. His suicide obviously cut that short.
And just to follow up, when this took his own life, were you moving towards charges at that point?
It's very difficult for me to answer that. I mean, he was clearly a target of our investigation. We had accumulated a great deal of evidence to indicate that he was responsible for her killing. We were waiting for certain evidence to come through. Forensic examinations take a little while. We were waiting to de-encrypt cell phones that were seized as part of that investigation, which has been extremely, extremely challenging because of the privacy protections that have recently been put in place on some of these late model phones. So I can't begin to speculate, but it's just not prudent based on where we are now. Yes, sir. Hey.
Would you say the note was the main piece of evidence, or was anything else uncovered during the
Well, I'm not going to get into detail on the other evidence that we gathered to point towards him, but I can tell you this, that we had concluded and confirmed that he was responsible for her killing before we found the note after his suicide. That essentially reaffirmed it for us. Yes, ma'am.
Do you anticipate any charges being filed against anyone else related to Stephanie?
It's a possibility. We still have, like I mentioned, some loose ends to tie up as part of this investigation, but I do want to reiterate to the public and the media that we have no reason to believe that anyone other than John Osbilgan was responsible for the death or killing of Stephanie Parze, that there is not a co-conspirator out there that's running in the streets presenting a danger to the community at all.
Could anybody have assisted him in disposing of the remaining stuff?
Nothing is off the table. We continue our investigation. That's the best I can do for you, sorry. Yes, sir.
Chris, did he have any weapons or access to any guns of any sort in his background or the house?
As far as firearms go, none that I'm aware of. There was a knife that was recovered out in New York that was analyzed to determine if it was somehow involved in this missing person homicide investigation, and those results came back negative. He had disposed of a number of things off the side of the road up there from his car. The back shell that goes into the trunk, rubber shell. We found a little bit of clothing that was unrelated to this investigation. So to answer your question pointedly, there was a knife that was recovered, but not related to this homicide.
Nothing that was discarded on the side of the road in Staten Island showed any DNA or anything like that for Stephanie?
No, nothing to that end. And as far as where Stephanie was recovered in Old Bridge, as far as I know, no items of evidentiary value that you would allude to at that scene either.
Can we say whether her body was wrapped in a blanket or anything like that?
I'm going to defer to the prosecutor here. I think he's going to stay tight-lipped on that.
We
Yeah.
cannot say.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris.
Yes, sir. Hey, Alex.
Any communication with the Osbillion family regarding this outcome and what you have determined?
No, because they're represented by counsel. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
As far as anyone else who might be charged, do you believe there are other people who had information that they did not provide?
I really, it's not prudent for me to speculate. We're still unwrapping all of that. The only thing I would encourage you all to do is to stay tuned. We'll see where, if at all, this goes. The next finding we hope to get will be a cause and manner of death from the Middlesex County Medical Examiner's Office. That'll depend on the forensic examination of Stephanie, and we will hope for the best. Sometimes they're inconclusive, depending on, decay and things like that, but we're hopeful. We'll see what happens.
Do you have any sense of the timeline of events after she went missing and how her body might have turned up in Middlesex County?
We do. Again, it's part of an overarching criminal investigation, but suffice it to say, we know that John Osbilgan was the last person to be with her in the late evening hours or early morning hours of October 30th or October 31st. And we concluded that he killed her early that morning and took her remains and disposed of her, obviously up in Route 9 in Old Bridge.
For her early morning, the night after she went missing?
It's very difficult to pin down an exact timeline. We're working through that, but yeah, I think it's fair assumption that it was right after the actual killing. Dino?
Where the remains were discovered, is it safe to assume that that's where they were all along, or was this in a spot where obviously they would have been discovered earlier if they had been there?
That's part of the ongoing investigation. Forensic teams are going to be making those determinations based upon the evidence and based upon their review of that evidence and their investigation at the scene as to the length and time that Stephanie was there.
All right.
Last question. Does Ed, would you answer a question about your angels?
Sure.
Do you feel that, regardless of the fact that you did not search that particular spot, do you feel this validates all of the effort, all of the work, all of the volunteerism that went into this?
Absolutely. They searched everywhere. We searched over 60 different locations. And then when you mentioned the angels, 2 angels found her, if you think about it. Why were they there? So they found her one way or the other. Might not have been on one of our searches, but 2 angels were put there for a purpose. That's how we feel.